Hello and welcome back to the Matchbook Champions League podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined as always by Miguel Delaney, Mark O'Haire, and Adrian Clarke. Adrian, I gave you a little bit of shout out on the Weekend Football podcast, but I want to drum it up for those that are Champions League only listeners, perhaps, if there's anyone out there. That Adrian went 4-0 last week.
4-0, yeah. Happy days. Yeah, it was good. It was good. Didn't put anything on myself, which was just idiotic. But yeah, it was it was a good week. Look, you got to take the good weeks when they come because it's never easy to get these things nailed on. But yeah, I had a lucky week.
You were saying you got distracted the Dortmund game. You wanted to back them, but between working at the Arsenal City game, their priorities overtook.
Exactly. But yeah, no, it was good, and we've got another interesting sort of slate, haven't we, for this week? It's it's hotting up nicely.
Mark, I see you smirking. Is this an easier week for you this week than last week? There seems to be, I say, a couple of easier games and a couple of arguably tougher games. Like I can't call Liverpool Real Madrid for example.
I was smirking because it took 40 seconds for Arsenal to be mentioned on a Champions League podcast in a competition they're not even in. But I found it a tricky week actually. This one, I think there's I think we'll get to the games individually, but I don't think there's any obvious easy winners out of any of the four. I think they're all very competitive in their own right. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, Arsenal 2.32 now to win the Premier League. So that's the latest Premier League update on this podcast. For what it's worth, I will be having a bet at those prices. Miguel, you were at the Football Writers Yaya Toure last night. How did you get on?
Yeah, it was a good night, to be fair. Vieira spoke very well about Yaya Toure, who was quite emotional about it. But it was an entertaining evening.
Yeah, very good. It's always good to see you up suited and booted, Miguel, on the social media. Do be following Miguel on Twitter and Instagram as well. We will head into the four games. We're going to cover Liverpool, Madrid, Frankfurt versus Napoli, Leipzig versus City, Inter versus Porto, and then we do the long shots, which have been very successful. Shout out to Adrian Clarke tipping Fulham there at the weekend to beat Brighton, and then we'll go to best bets as well. If you are watching on the YouTube, do hit that like button and let us know in the comments who you're backing. And if you're on the podcast, head over and hit that like button. It'd be much appreciated from ourselves. We'll get straight into it. The first game, the marquee game on Tuesday night, is Liverpool at home to Real Madrid. And we'll take a look at the betting that we currently have at matchbook.com. You can back Liverpool at 2.34 here. Real Madrid 9-4 in all money terms, or 3.25. The draw is available at 3.7. The goal line is 3.0, quite high, but that is shaded a good bit towards the under at 1.74. The Asian handicap line, Real Madrid are getting a quarter of a goal head start at 1.95, and both teams to score yes is favoured a lot in that market at 1.65. So Miguel, I'll head over to you to set this up. You have a strong fancy in this game, but maybe a little bit on Liverpool. Where are they at currently, if you can answer that? Because they were impressive at times in Newcastle to get the 2-goal lead, but then against 10 men they seem to kind of almost go back into their shell a small bit.
I've actually followed my own advice from last week and put on Liverpool to win the Champions League at 12-1.
Oh wow, okay.
They weren't. They were actually quite poor, I must say, against Newcastle. But I think that's the sort of performance that often happens when a team is recovering in that way. And even if the performance is obviously not any sort of ideal in terms of what Klopp would want, it's about the kind of psychology of getting back on track and digging in and being defiant. And from that perspective, I think it was a really positive step, no matter how many saves Alisson made. And you can kind of see, once they get injuries back, I think has been a massive issue, you can see something closer to the normal Liverpool returning. And I think this game, I would actually make Liverpool favourites this game, I have to say. Now, all of this has to be put in the context. I was about to say Real Madrid have not been that impressive this season, but it was exactly this time last year, and we were saying the same thing. I was at that first leg against Paris Saint-Germain, the one they lost 1-0 with an Mbappe goal, and really poor. At that point, you wouldn't have thought they were Champions League winners, and then they went and did it. But in saying that, I really don't think lightning can strike twice in that regard. Even last season's run was sort of based in this kind of emotional defiance. And I think Liverpool are actually in better shape right now. I would go for a narrow Liverpool win.
Okay. Interesting play there for Miguel in Liverpool versus Real Madrid. Mark, I see you're tipping up the draw here. So I guess, is this in terms of can't really call the game, or do you think there's a good bit of juice in this 3.7 available on the draw?
A bit of both, really. From a Liverpool perspective, first and foremost, I guess you got to mention the Anfield factor. A bit of a cliche, of course, but we've seen in past how it can be very influential, particularly on European nights when the Liverpool crowd get behind their team. Secondly, as Miguel says, the returning players have made an impact. Van Dijk, Jota, Firmino in the squad. We expect Darwin to be okay as well, winning back-to-back games with clean sheets. Been a long time since Liverpool have done that, so psychology, as Miguel talks about, is a big bonus. But I think Jurgen Klopp was absolutely spot on post-match when he was asked if he can see this Liverpool team getting back to their best, and he kind of pleaded a bit of caution, because I felt the Everton win was overvalued in some quarters, sort of the hype around that. And I also thought Newcastle, they were quite poor for a lot of it and put under huge pressure, whether it was 10v11 or 11v11. Alisson was very crucial to that too. So, yeah, Real Madrid aren't absolutely purring themselves. Winning in Pamplona against Osasuna is a big result at the best of times. Doing so without Benzema is a big plus. He's back. No Cruz, no Tchouameni, but Camavinga will come into midfield. Dani Ceballos has actually been one of the best and most consistent players this season in the midfield. You Arsenal fans will know well. Might be surprised by that. But going forward, Vinicius, Rodrigo playing well. Benzema available. Got the experience of Modric. Thibaut Courtois as well has come back into the fold in recent weeks. Just a colossus between the sticks, and he's worth a point here and there for Real Madrid. But yeah, I just wonder whether this match might follow last week's first legs. We've basically got two of the best shot stoppers on the planet in goal. We've got two teams not exactly in their finest form, massive European names, two-legged tie, first leg. I wouldn't be rushing to back that goal line, the overs. I think the unders could be a real play here, requiring 4 goals or more to see the bet lose if you take under 3 goals. But that's not going to be a fun bet to cheer on, especially with all the attacking quality we've got on both sets of squads here. So, I thought the draw was the next best step, really, at 3.7. I think Real Madrid, I've just kind of given up opposing them in these big matches when they're not playing well, because they just have something about them, and the fact that Benzema is available is a massive plus for them too. So, I also should mention Fede Valverde as well, who's had a bit of a tough time since the World Cup, but at least in the last 2-3 matches, he's really sort of shown the form we know and kind of expect from him, shooting from distance and being a real menace, and just getting around the pitch and being a real presence. And look, Liverpool's issues still remain. They're still vulnerable defensively, and that midfield makeup is still not spot on. So I'd be wary of backing Liverpool, be more pro Real Madrid if I had to, but therefore I thought the draw was a fair solution at 3.7. But if you've got the balls, I don't back under 3 goals at 1.75.
It is one of those. It could easily go unders, but if there's an early goal, you're in massive trouble, I think. Adrian, over to you for this game. What did you make of Liverpool at the weekend? The same question I asked Miguel.
Well, sensational early on with the goals. Two brilliant goals, weren't they? I thought the passes from Trent Alexander-Arnold and Mo Salah were two of the best you'll see all season. Great finishes as well from Nunez and Gakpo. No, it made it look easier than it was. So, yeah, going forward, much more like it. But they conceded more shots, so they had the man advantage for a lot of this game. Yet Newcastle had more shots. They had a higher XG. Newcastle had more touches in Liverpool's box than the other way around. They had more shots inside the box than Liverpool. So I couldn't get behind Liverpool here, even though they've got the European Anfield factor there. I just feel that against Newcastle, they gave away some real high quality chances, relied heavily on their goalkeeper. What are they going to be like when it's Vinicius and Rodrigo and Benzema and co coming at them? That's my concern. I don't trust Liverpool's off the ball work yet. So for that reason, I would oppose them. I think the draw is a definite player, but I would look to get Real Madrid on side with a plus quarter goal handicap. That way, obviously, we're in the money unless Liverpool win. So the draw gives us a profit as well as Real Madrid winning. So yeah, it's a tough one to call. Obviously, they've got the firepower now. I think Jota and Firmino coming back makes a big difference because then they can freshen things up from the bench. But Liverpool's midfield remains that work in progress, and at the back, even though Van Dijk's returned, I don't see them being solid enough to tame Real Madrid over the course of 90 minutes. And Real Madrid have not been leaking many goals. They did in the Club World Cup, obviously. They just had a little bit of fun with that competition. But in La Liga, 5 clean sheets in their last 6 games. Thibaut Courtois in good form, as Mark was saying. I don't think they were probably going to find it easy to break them down, but a bit like the Champions League final. So, and they're a little bit of a bogey team for Liverpool, Real Madrid. So, yeah, for all of these reasons, Real Madrid on the quarter goal handicap for me.
Okay, yeah, I think, and this pick is usually for the podcast listeners. I will side with Mark just for a fun bet and draw at around 3.7. I think that's a good interest bet to have. It is in Matchbook Insights. You'll find the 3 selections. So Mark's gone for a draw. Adrian Real Madrid plus quarter of a goal. And Miguel, in terms of a bet, I know you're favouring Liverpool in the match odds, but you're looking maybe towards the both teams to score no angle at about 2.48.
Yeah, I'm thinking this will be a narrow game. I think I think the Champions League season at the moment is very much suffering the after effects of the World Cup. I've been surprised at the tightness of some of the games. And for that reason, I'm kind of leaning towards a kind of a 1-0, 2-0 Liverpool. I think it'd be a very tactical match.
Okay, yeah, that fits in a little bit with Mark's unders plays. If that's the sort of thing you're looking for, both teams to score no around 2.48 does seem quite big on first glance. We'll go to the same game that night, or the other game that night. It's Frankfurt at home to Napoli, and we'll take a look at the betting as we currently have on Matchbook.com. You can back Frankfurt at 3.6, and Napoli at short price at 2.2. The draw is 3.65. Both teams to score yes is available at 1.71. No is the underdog in that market at 2.34. The Asian handicap line sees Frankfurt get plus a quarter of a goal head start at 2.06. The total, incidentally, is 2.5. Shaded a good bit to the over at 1.87. So, Adrian, over to you. You have a strong fancy in this game.
Yeah, I fancy goals. I really do. For a number of reasons. Obviously, with Napoli, they just score for fun, don't they? It's incredible. 19 goals across their last 7 games, all of which Napoli have won. That KO combo at the top end of the pitch, Kvaratskhelia and Osimhen continue to thrive, and you just feel that every time Napoli go out onto the pitch, they're going to score 2, 3, 4, or 5 goals, don't you? The issue is at the back, even though they're absolutely on fire, 15 points clear at the top of the league, they have conceded. I looked at their record against the better teams in Italy. They've had 10 games against the top 10, and they've conceded at least one in 10 games against the top 10. So clean sheets are hard to come by. In the group games, how did it compare? Well, they conceded a goal in 5 or 6 group games. So you give Frankfurt a shot at scoring at least once. Maybe Napoli might outscore them. On the Frankfurt side, they're in good form at home. Won 7 of their last 8. They've won 5 in a row in front of their own supporters, and Kolo Muani in particular is in good form. He's got 7 in 8. So yeah, they've got a little bit about them going forward. I think their average goals per game at home in the Bundesliga is 3.55. So it's a stadium that's seen some good games this season. The 64% of Frankfurt's matches in Bundesliga have gone over 2.5 goals. So you've got the Germans who are, they're attack-minded and they score goals. They're involved in high-scoring games against a very, very exciting Napoli that just want to go out there and win every single game, whether it's home or away. It doesn't seem to matter for them. So, yeah, I see goals. Probably Napoli winning. I was looking at Napoli and over 3.5 goals. Wasn't quite brave enough to do it, but I'm going to go with just the over 2.5. I can see both teams scoring. Probably Napoli getting at least 2.
Yeah, Miguel, over to you. You're on the same bet with over 2.5 goals. I did find the Napoli's defense up against the top teams in Serie A and the Champions League group stage stat particularly interesting there.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels the obvious play of this game, especially with the way Eintracht Frankfurt play as well. In terms of that pressing style, I think it'll be an open game. Even over 2.5 almost feels a little bit conservative. But the one thing maybe that kind of brings a bit of restraint here is I wonder whether, just because Napoli are so full on in the title race, whether it'll be any sort of psychological shift in Europe, especially as it gets to the knockout stages and it becomes real. I mean, in the group stage when they destroyed Liverpool in that first game, it was almost felt like it was that kind of continuation of where they were, that carried through momentum. And not to say they were doing it without thinking, but it was kind of, they're in this kind of state of flowing through it. It's a little bit different now. So I'm just slightly curious about the shift to Europe, while I would still have Napoli as favourites. But I think the safe bet from that perspective is goals.
Yeah, over 2.5 goals, 1.84 currently. Napoli on the match odds marker 2.22. Quick question on Frankfurt in general terms. People who don't follow the Bundesliga will be amazed if they looked up the table and how close they are to Bayern Munich, even given their league position. What have you made of the Bundesliga this season? Is it the case that Bayern have just come back to the pack and are not, or maybe not concentrating in certain games? What is it that has the Bundesliga so close this season?
Good question. I think, some of the key teams at the top end of the table haven't performed to the level we probably expected them to, including Bayern Munich. But I would expect that to sort of shift it to gear. Now we're coming into springtime, and still fully expect Bayern Munich to win the title, and probably by a reasonable distance too. Union Berlin have been a huge surprise package, up their level on points, which is kind of fairy tale stuff really. I missed the opportunity to go top of the table at the weekend when they failed to beat bottom of the table Schalke in a 0-0 draw. But RB Leipzig obviously had a managerial change earlier in this campaign, so they had a bit of a false start, if you like, but they've been playing catch up. They've been the best team in Germany since the managerial change under Marco Rose, and probably be the closest challengers. But Dortmund are sort of not going away, even if you can't trust them in the big games either. And Bayer Leverkusen have been a massive disappointment too, before Xabi Alonso came into the club. So a lot of the sort of leading lights, if you like, have not been playing to the same standards we've come to expect in previous campaigns, and that's allowed the likes of Wolfsburg or even Eintracht Frankfurt to have a serious chance of potentially finishing in the top four, which would obviously equal Champions League qualification. And this is a really interesting matchup, because if your task here was to sort of make a case for Napoli to win the match, you could do so pretty comfortably. But I think even if you had to sort of do similar for Frankfurt, you could make a case for them, because this is a team who are Europa League champions and showed last season, regardless of their prices or their sort of European stature, they are very capable of pulling off big results against big teams. They've got a really shrewd head coach in charge there. As the guys have already mentioned, there's some real players of quality in forward areas. Mouani being the obvious standout star, but Götze's having a great campaign. Lindstrom, Kamada, these kind of players who are capable of sort of producing big moments in big matches. And Frankfurt will give it a go. They always tend to do, and that's why I do sort of endorse the guy's selection there on backing over 2.5 goals. And I was very close to joining them. The reason I haven't is just price, really. I made Napoli closer to even money to win this match, and whilst I was kind of slightly negative about their prospects of winning the whole competition last week when we discussed the outrights, I think this is a good moment for them, a good opportunity for them, because they are so far clear domestically right now. They are injury-free. They've got a fully fit squad. They're winning games consistently. They're on the verge of something quite historic, and there's no immediate domestic pressure, so they can put all their efforts into this fixture. And look, they are playing not just individually, but also collectively as one of Europe's top sides at the minute. And it's incredible, really, considering where they were at last July, August time, when a lot of their sort of big stars, symbolic players from numerous years departed the club, and they've had to sort of go and recruit really savvily. And to get Luciano Spalletti to pull it all together so quickly has been just immense, really. And just throughout the camp, throughout the season, throughout the spine of the side, there's players who've been of huge importance, not just Kvaratskhelia and Osimhen, but Di Lorenzo has led by example. Anguissa has been amazing in midfield, Kim at centre-half as well. They've been brilliant. And ultimately, we're getting 2.2 on a team who have won 25 of 29 Serie A and Champions League matches this season. They've just been a juggernaut. They've already won at Roma, Milan, Lazio, Atalanta. They're winning big games. Friday night, they went away to Sassuolo, which is a reasonably tricky game on paper, and they won it comfortably. And they're just doing that week in, week out, making a habit of it. So I think if they do go there and Frankfurt try and fight fire with fire, we should get a great game full of goals, but I expect Napoli to come out on top. So 2.2, I think, is a reasonable price on the visitors.
Okay, yeah, Napoli at 2.2. Some of the sports books agree with you, Mark. They have them in and around 2.1, 2.05. So you are getting a better price with match with betting exchange, and those margins will tighten as the markets get more liquid an hour or two before kickoff. We will lock in over 2.5 goals, around 1.84, the selection of Miguel and Adrian in this game for that bet. And we'll move on to the Wednesday games. We will start with Leipzig versus Manchester City, which I think is a fascinating game on Wednesday night. We'll take a look at the betting as we have it on matchbook.com, and Mark's touched on Leipzig's form in the Bundesliga, and they're kind of priced up accordingly at around 4.8. Manchester City 1.84. The draw is 4.0. Both teams to score yes is available at around 1.72, and no is 2.32. Leipzig are getting a 3/4 of a goal head start at 1.9. City in that market at 2.04, and the total is 3 goals shaded towards the under. Mark, you have a strong fancy in this game, and you've kind of touched on some of Leipzig's forms. You're expecting them to be really competitive here against City.
Yeah, really looking forward to this. I don't think this match is a foregone conclusion at all, and I don't think the two-legged tie is either. I think Leipzig have got a puncher's chance here of pulling off something quite exciting. They were the better team home and away against Real Madrid in the group stages, if that matters at all. They have had a couple of hiccups this calendar year since the World Cup break. They tried to change system because they're sort of chance creation and goal conversion had dipped a little bit since the World Cup break, but didn't go too well to plan. They lost at home to Union a fortnight ago, but bounced back at the weekend with a really impressive 3-0 destruction away at Wolfsburg. Went back to the 4-2-3-1. Christian and Kunku came off the bench for the last 20 minutes, which is a huge plus for them, an enormous boost. But, Danny Elmo is missing, but you still look at the sort of blend and variety that they've got in midfield and going forward. This is a team who've got so many different threats from different ways. Andre Silva can finish chances brilliantly. Timo Werner not had the best campaign, but he's got pace. He will trouble teams who play a high line. Emil Forsberg, as we know, can create opportunities. Dominic Szoboszlai, not just from set pieces, but from distance, can score goals. David Rahm just bombards from fullback as well. They will have a go here. They score goals. They love to get forward and create chances, especially at home. As I said, they've been the most consistent and best performer in the Bundesliga since Marco Rose took over, scoring freely. The issue they have, I think, is at the back. They don't keep clean sheets consistently. And Peter Galassi, the goalkeeper, is missing through injury. So that is a downgrade. Now, obviously, I know the group stage is played under different dynamics, but if you look at their 6 games, 4 went over 3.5 goals. All 6 featured at least 2 goals. And the matches against Real Madrid were really good fun, really high XG numbers and loads and loads of shots as well. So I do like the over 2.5 goals. I think Leipzig do score. Obviously, you expect Man City to score whoever they're playing against. And then you're just looking for a third goal to get over the 2.5 line, which I think is passable. They played each other last year. Leipzig had a different coach. It was 6-3 at the Etihad and 2-1 in Germany. The City had already qualified before losing 2-1 in Germany, but even still, I think there's sort of precedence there. And City were given 2 really tough games by Dortmund in the group stage. And if you look at their away record in the Premier League, they've failed to win half of their away matches domestically. And they've only won twice away at teams in the top 14, recording just 1 clean sheet in 8 away games at those top 14 teams as well. So, they're not the sort of slick City we've come to expect. We've talked about it a few times now on the podcast. So, I give Leipzig a real chance here, but I think goals are the smarter selection.
Okay, yeah, Adrian, you're in agreement as well. Would you share Mark's concerns of City's away record there and maybe perhaps their inability to keep clean sheets on the road?
Definitely, yeah. Just home or away, 5 of their last 8 games have gone overs, but 5 of their last 8 games, both teams have scored. In Manchester City matches, the win at Arsenal is their only win in their last 5 as well. So they're not coming into it in amazing form. I was really impressed with them when I saw them in the second half at Emirates Stadium. But yeah, and although they played very well against Nottingham Forest for a long periods, that it was a really wasteful match in the end, wasn't it, for them? And it was a very, very poor goal to concede defensively, where Bernardo Silva again in this left back berth gets caught in a position he's not comfortable in, dives in, they play around him. Laporte's put in an awkward position, they play around him. Don't know what Rodri's doing, and then they slot the ball across the face of goal for Wood. It was a mess, and I think at the Champions League level, the reason why I don't think they're favourites for the Champions League, even though all the bookies do, is that I still don't think they're brilliant when they don't have the ball. Manchester City and Leipzig have got very dangerous players, as Mark's been outlining. You look at their record in terms of overs, 6 of the last 8 games and have gone over. 6 of their last 8 in the Bundesliga. Both teams have to score has landed as well. It does feel like BTTS is almost nailed on here. I'm really interested about the battle as well between Gvardiol and Haaland. I think that's a really exciting duel between a sort of a beast of a young centre half and obviously, probably the world's best number 9 centre forward. That's going to be fascinating. It really is. And yeah, Haaland, I don't know, his form's a little bit patchy. I mean, he's, by his amazing standards, a little bit patchy. I thought it was interesting in the last 2 games, in good positions, he hit the deck. He looked to go to ground. There's one with Gabriel, bit of a tussle, it got overturned. And then obviously the one at the weekend against Forest, he was away. He was looking for the pen. Is that a sign of a slight lacking confidence there, a little dip there in his own head that he's not backing himself to convert them? I suspect it might be.
Okay, I hadn't thought of that with Haaland, those 2 incidents. Yeah, obviously he could have probably stayed on his feet for at least one of them. Yeah,
well, the Forest one for sure he could. Yeah,
Forest one for sure. Yeah, where it was probably a foul, it was a foul. Yeah, he could have stayed on there, got the second goal. Interesting play. Incidentally, you mentioned City as favourites, so they are 3.1 in the outright market. Bayern have shortened a lot since you tipped them up last week, Adrian, into 4.7. So, look, City are quite short if Mark and Adrian's concerns are correct on City. Miguel, you are a little bit more confident that City will get the job done here, but there will probably be goals in this game.
I mean, it does just strike me as one of those games where, I mean, it actually seems in the last 16, every single year, City get the kind of third or fourth place German side who's going to play Schalke, Borussia Mönchengladbach. Dortmund, I suppose, would usually be the second place team. And they generally get through with absolutely no problems. Maybe this is a little bit kind of different this year because it still feels like City are somewhat erratic, and that is indicated by the fact they followed the win over Arsenal with that 1-1 draw against Forest the weekend. And it's possible that Arsenal game, it was one of those situations where, because the kind of the context of the game and the grandeur of it and the meaning of the title race kind of focused them. But then as soon as it ended and they got the win, it's almost like they were kind of back to the normal of this season, which has been a strangely erratic Manchester City. And that, for that reason, I would leave the game a little bit open in that sense. I do think City will concede, but I think they'll have too much power for Leipzig here.
Yeah, I suppose if you do think there is a slight quality gap and City winning both teams to score is quite a big price, Miguel, around 3.55, just over 5-2. We will lock in over 2.5 goals with the lad selections on 1.76. I will kind of share some of those concerns and kind of covers you if City do go on an absolute batter Leipzig as well. So it is a safe play, hence the odds at around 1.76. Move on to the final last 16 tie, or the round of 16 tie. And it's Inter at home to Porto. This is a fascinating game now. We'll take a look at the betting as we currently have on the Matchbook Betting Exchange. Inter are the favourites at around 1.79. Porto available at 5.5. And the draw is 3.8. Both teams to score yes is the slight underdog in this market at 2.07. No is 1.92. The Asian handicap line, Porto get half a goal star at a pretty decent price at around 2.24. And the total is about 2.5, and that's shaded a good bit towards the under. So, Adrian, we'll head over to you for this one. You're going with Inter and under 4.5 goals at 2.1. You think they'll just about get the job here, but it'll be cagey enough.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a game full of goals. They're two of the most informed teams in Europe, that is for sure. You go back to early November, Inter Milan have won 14, drawn 3 and lost 1. So they come into this in really, really strong, solid form, 3 clean sheets in their last 4. Lautaro Martinez has kind of got over his early World Cup woes and has come back on fire, really. 8 goals in 11 appearances since Argentina won the World Cup. So he's in good nick. And they've got a lot of experience. They've got depth, haven't they, in the squad? They're not the most exciting team in European football, that's for sure. But they've got a lot of players that have been involved in games like this before. And I think that gives them the edge over Porto, who tend to come a cropper in the last 16 or the quarterfinals every single year, don't they? They're in great form as well. I mean, they have won 10 in a row, 14 in their last 15, 18 of their last 20. They are used to winning games, and they ended the group stage, even though it was a while ago, absolutely flying, scoring goals, winning home and away. So they're dangerous, no doubt about it. But I don't know, it's a while since they've played a team, I would say, of Inter's caliber domestically. The last defeat was against Benfica back in early October. So I just give Inter the edge here because of home advantage, because they're pretty solid at the back and the form of Lautaro. So Inter and under 4.5. I could have gone under 3.5 to be honest, but I'd have enough confidence. But Inter and under 4.5 is my play here.
Yeah, at around 11-10 or 2.1 currently on Matchbook. Miguel, you kind of shared the concerns with Adrian in terms of goals. So both teams to score no is probably the right favourite in that market at around 1.92.
Yeah, I mean, Inter's form as well. I mean, they haven't exactly been watertight in Serie A this season. But again, I feel it's a kind of context to the Champions League this year. Also, the first leg, the manner in which Porto came through the group, I do think this will be a tactical game. And again, it's one of those where, and I feel this maybe a lot this week, bar maybe Leipzig against Man City, where we're talking about a 1-0 or a 2-0. And from that perspective, with Inter at home and not quite resurgent form, I fancy a narrow Inter win. But I think the safer bet is both teams score no, because of course that covers the 0-0 as well, which could be very likely.
Miguel, I know you have the Spanish connections, but I sense Serie A is very close to being your second favorite league. Would I be right in that?
I mean, I do think at the moment La Liga, which obviously I suppose one of my clubs, Osasuna, are from La Liga, but it is going through a stale period. I think even in terms of the football, I mean, it was something that was, I suppose, articulated by Spain in the World Cup. I think there's a bit of a crisis in terms of tactics in Spain, and that while they're obviously producing players of a really high technical level, it feels like it's almost kind of stagnated a bit, that it's producing a series of midfielders. There's been no success with David Villa. And if you look at Italy now compared to that, Italy is actually quite, partly from the influence of club ownership and the way it's become quite an analytics-led league. It's sort of following the German model in terms of pressing. And it's quite strange. I mean, Italy, I would say, was in crisis for almost a decade because Juventus were almost guaranteed champions. But the vacuum left by Juventus's fall, without even getting into kind of the current issues around the club, has meant there's this greater competitive balance to Serie A. That inherently makes it more watchable. That was basically the strength of the Premier League when it rose. It's about competitive balance and a vitality to the league and a sense of unpredictability. And while Napoli are en route to the title this year, obviously, even that is like the story itself is a revelation.
Yeah, it's definitely bouncing back slowly, the Serie A. Mark, maybe tell us a little bit about the Portuguese league, because you're favouring Porto here, despite us waving the Serie A flag, myself and Miguel.
Yeah, look, I love Serie A, but I didn't have a strong view on this match coming into it until I saw the prices, because by my odds, I had Inter closer to evens. So to see them 1.8 or below 1.8 now, the market disagrees. Happy to try and take a bit of a view there against Inter, just because I believe these two teams are slightly closer than the market suggests. Say it pretty much every week, but if you had a home favourite, but you felt that the two teams were actually equal in terms of their ability, you'd expect the home team to be about 2.25, 2.3. Obviously, here we've got a team who are at home and below 1.8. So that's a reasonable difference. The market is saying that Inter are the better team, and by a reasonable distance too. I just want to oppose that view, because I just think Porto are a nightmare to play against, and to get them 2.24 with a half-goal start appeals. The guys have already talked about the resolve that they've shown in terms of getting through that group, and not just getting through, but winning the group. They lost their first two games, but I thought they were the better team in both, despite losing 4-0 to Brugge. They even lost to Atletico in dramatic circumstances where they were really good in that game. They've got a strong group, an experienced group. Their form, as Adrian says, has been superb. They've got a domestic cup success just a couple of weeks ago against Sporting. I just really like them, and I like their head coach, Sergio Conceição. They're a dogged bunch, but I think Conceição is heading to Italian football sooner than later. I think there's been a lot of talk about him potentially getting a role at Inter or Lazio, his former clubs, at some point soon. So he'll see this as a great opportunity to show what he's capable of with his team. And look, Inter are the second best team in Italy right now. Got through a tricky game at the weekend with Lukaku scoring for the first time in ages, Mkhitaryan playing well, Brozovic coming back. Inzaghi's got options, rotated his team at San Siro. They tend to be pretty strong operators as well. But I look at their sort of form. They have been quite inconsistent. They have been a little bit bitty. And even in the Champions League group stages, the Barcelona matches were so loose and so open. That's definitely not going to be the case this time around. Porto are not going to give you that freedom to express yourself. They're looking for a tight, competitive game. They're going to be feisty. They want it to be ugly, dogged, low scoring. And I think they'll get it, to be honest. And if that is the case, then I can see them avoiding defeat, or at least I think they've got a better opportunity to avoid defeat than the market believes at 2.24. So the market has moved a bit since I sort of looked at these prices on Monday morning. If it continues to move, there's even going to be an opportunity to get Porto on side with a +1 start, which would really appeal to me.
Okay, yeah, Porto plus half a goal is the selection of Mark, and will be the selection of the podcast as well. Adrian, Inter and under 4.5 goals at 2.1, and both teams to score no for Miguel at 1.93. Just to recap some of the podcast bets we've selected out from the guys selection: over 2.5 goals in Leipzig versus Manchester City, over 2.5 goals in Frankfurt versus Napoli, and we're going for the draw in Liverpool versus Real Madrid at 3.7, thinking that's overpriced. They're all podcast selections, but if you want a full recap of every bet put up by Mark, Miguel, or Adrian, head to insights.matchbook.com, which will have that full recap for you. We'll move on to a popular long shot section. Adrian, we'll have to start with you. Fulham, I was racing. I was in Gordon Park, for those that watch horse racing. So I was only half watching the 3 o'clock kickoffs, and someone had told me about 5 minutes ago that Fulham had scored against Brighton. And my heart sank a small bit because I didn't have a penny on them. I hope you had some sort of small say on them yourself.
Of course I didn't. I did. No. I might have done. I can't remember. I did put a small amount on a number of our selections from the last podcast. But I can't remember if I did that one or not. I was chuffed with that. That was good. It was just a hunch, really, that Fulham against Brighton was more evenly matched than maybe the odds suggested. I mean, Brighton in the game battered them, didn't they? It was all Brighton, but Fulham are a resolute team this season, and I think we all continue to underappreciate and underrate them. So I was pleased that one landed. Hopefully this one will as well. My long shot is following on from the chat we just had. Actually, Inter Milan 1, FC Porto 0. I don't see it being a high scoring game. I think that Porto will make it awkward for Inter Milan. But just because of their experience, maybe that little bit of firepower up front with Martinez, Dzeko, Lukaku, one of them just popping up with maybe a deciding goal in the second half. That's how I see it panning out. But, over the 2 legs, I make these two very, very even. Porto could absolutely turn it around in Portugal. But 7.2. I thought 1-0 sounded good.
Okay, yeah, correct score is definitely a popular market on Matchbook if you want to have a look an hour or two before kickoff. And a scoreline here, Miguel, that maybe you can just see City pulling away from a Leipzig in a sort of 3-1 away. So 14.0 then is quite appealing. Yeah,
it just feels, again, I would say that City away leg against a German side in the Champions League, a German side who weren't Bayern Munich, I should say. 3-1 feels a fairly standard score. And I don't think City are kind of tight enough at the moment to keep a clean sheet. Leipzig, obviously, are quite an energetic side in that way. But I think, this is the other side of this as well, actually, that City will be, whatever about the title race, we know the Champions League is the one Guardiola wants most. So we might see a bit of a refocus there. But I think 3-1 is quite a safe bet.
And just the fact they're struggling a small bit in the league, it could be that Champions League winning season, perhaps. Mark, over to you. You touched on draw being your best bet for Liverpool versus Real Madrid. So 1-1 appeals at around 8.0.
Yeah, not a major correct score punter, but being on the draw in this game and just being wary of the attacking threats that both teams pose, but also respectful that this is a first leg knockout tie between two of Europe's biggest clubs. I think it will be pretty competitive, but as I said earlier in the show, I don't imagine it being a hugely high-scoring match either. So if I think it's going to be a draw, I think 1-1 is probably more likely than the 0-0. So 7-1 seems fair enough.
And to throw you a curveball, Mark, in terms of correct scores, anyone out there who wants to get into correct score betting, what are some of the pitfalls that maybe you found that kind of made you stay away from a lot of the correct scores?
Actually, it's just very, very high variance. If you're backing correct scores every week and making a profit, you're doing a good thing. So it's very, very difficult. The margins are high, but it's just not a market I've ever really sort of attacked with any sort of gusto and had success. So I think there's probably better ways to have your sort of throwaway quids here and there.
Okay, yeah, good punting advice from Mark O'Haire. We'll move on to best bets, Mark, and stick with you for this one. So you do have a strong view on this. Leipzig at home to Manchester City. I sense the Porto bet wasn't a million miles away from being your best bet either.
I think all four of them are tricky, and I think we can make cases for all 8 teams in various ways as this midweek is that close and competitive. But I believe Leipzig will score against Manchester City, and that for that reason I think the overs has to come into consideration at 1.76. It's very rare we get this kind of price on an over 2.5 goals bet involving Leipzig in the Bundesliga or Manchester City in the Premier League. So when they're playing each other, albeit in the first leg of a knockout tie, I think there's real merit in supporting it. I think Leipzig got so many different threats, and Manchester City themselves, we talk about them not particularly playing well. I know Miguel's more confident than I am in them on Wednesday night or Tuesday night, whenever they're playing. But the beauty of this bet and backing over 2.5 goals is if City do turn up and play to the best of their ability, we know that they can be the best team on the planet. And if they do that, they can cover this line themselves without Leipzig contributing. So, I like this bet just because the price and the line is quite advantageous.
Okay, 1.76 currently, over 2.5 goals, Leipzig City. Miguel, over to you. Liverpool versus Real Madrid. You are expecting a cagey game. Both teams to score now is almost 6-4, 2.48.
Yeah, with that influence as well, but think about how Carlo Ancelotti has generally approached the Champions League. Now, that might change slightly given that he did play very deep with Casemiro last year. He's got maybe a slightly more mobile midfield this season, but I still expect a similar approach, especially away from home with the way he played those games. Let's not forget the way Madrid got through that Champions League was almost kind of in the late chaos of games. And of course, the form of Benzema. Now, without that same attack on that form this season, I expect Ancelotti to really constrain the game, but I'm relatively confident in a Liverpool win, I would say. But it just means I think the safest bet here is both teams not to score. I can see a 1-0 either way.
Okay, the 2.48 currently. And Adrian, final word to you on the best bets. Frankfurt versus Napoli. You do like the overs here, 1.84.
Yeah, I really do. Yeah, I think that a little bit like what Mark said there about Manchester City, I think Napoli are capable of covering this line themselves if they play to the form that we've seen for much of this season. So many of their players are just brimming with confidence, bursting with it. And yeah, Frankfurt don't have the tightest of defences. They're not an especially cautious side. So I think Napoli will, home or away, they tend to be scoring 2 or more goals in the vast majority of their matches. They don't keep very many clean sheets, as I've outlined. Haven't kept one against the top 10 in Italy. Didn't keep one in 5 of 6 group games. And Frankfurt score goals as well. I think they got 6 in their last 3 group stage games, Frankfurt. So they're capable. They've got goal scorers. They've got threats that might be an issue for Napoli. So yeah, I think this could be an absolute cracker. Over 2.5 goals. Yeah, it just feels like that's really likely.
Okay, maybe a couple of good games to look forward to throughout the card, but particularly Leipzig City and Frankfurt versus Napoli, I think. My thanks to Miguel, my thanks to Mark and Adrian. We'll all be back on Thursday afternoon to preview the weekend's football, hopefully celebrating a couple of winners from the Champions League. Insights.matchbook.com, the place to find all the Champions League bets, and if you want a full recap. Good luck if you're having a bet in the Champions League. We'll chat to you on Thursday. Bye-bye.